Hey, it's spring and we all want to get back in the garden, so let me show you how we created this raised bed garden.
First thing we had to do is set posts for a fence. We have cows, so we didn't need them getting in. Our corner posts were 8-foot, 3 to 4 inch diameter, pressure treated post we got from Tractor Supply, and we set it with concrete. We reused field fence from another project, so it's a little bent up from the cows, but it serves its purpose. All of our property is Bermuda pasture, so we have to till this up. There is no getting around that Bermuda. It still even comes up through the weed fabric. I'll show you later. Next, I laid down my weed fabric. This is 4 foot wide, and I used landscape staples to secure it down. I then put the raised beds directly on top of it, and then I had to fill in with mulch because it's hot in Texas, and this black fabric fries plants, so I had to get something down. Unfortunately, it breaks down and makes the perfect place for all these weeds. But they're pretty shallow rooted on top of this weed fabric, so they're pretty easy to pull.
Many moons ago, we made these pressure treated wooden raised beds. I know a lot of people have things against pressure treated, but we're still not dead and we've been eating from them for a while. These are about 1 foot deep, 2 feet wide, and most of them are 10 feet long. Some of them are a little bit longer because of where they used to sit in our old garden at the house.
And we made these by cutting down a 4x4 post and using it as a corner brace to nail into with a nail gun. These little ones with posts coming out of the top I used for pole beams. A couple of the beds have a hog panel arched across the walkway. This is where I grew my sketty squash last year, and it did amazing. And we just bent those hog panels and then attached them with fence staples to the sides of the raised beds. Like I said, most of these raised beds were moved from our house, so I don't have footage of us building any, and when we did build new ones, I just didn't think of recording it. I ended up using 3 bags of the compost in the bottom, and then 2 to 3 bags, depending on the size of the beds, of the garden soil. I did a little research to make sure that compost was going to be okay, and it had pretty good reviews by real people. Also, I already had a tree planted here and I didn't want to move it, so I put a little tree ring there. I made a garden gate with some gate hinges and some cedar, and I put a cattle panel behind it so it would have fencing.
I thought this pathway would look so cool because it's so realistic looking, and it's not. I had actually stained every single one of them with wood stain, which I'd seen Laura from Garden Answer do that on concrete pots, so I thought it would apply here too. I don't know if the sun baked it off or whatever. They're just blobs of concrete now.
We also put in a drip system, and we used 1/2-inch supply lines from the water hose. I'm not going to go into great detail about how we've set up our drip irrigation. You can find plenty of other YouTube videos on that. I ended up putting a 1/3 supply line here because it was a little too far to stretch all the way from the faucet. From these main supply lines, we drilled a hole through the beds and went in with a 1/4 inch drip line, and then that attaches to whatever emitter you're going to have inside that bed. I changed things for different plants. This ingrown portion I also did that for, but I included a shutoff valve to the main supply line in case I'm growing things that don't need as much water. Next, I put in my tunnel for my chickens. It's a chicken tunnel. They keep the grass down around the edges. They don't do a perfect job, but pretty good. I put a little tunnel here to go back into their pen. I like to keep them safe away from aerial predators or nighttime predators. This is how we originally did the channel with pieces of PEX, and I drove long spikes in the ground to keep that PEX in place, and then we put chicken wire over the top. I have since pulled most of the PEX out because it didn't do a great job of keeping all of it arched.
I think the first year we had this garden out here, we were starting zucchini and squash, and they weren't really doing horrible on the beds, but they weren't doing great. Our neighbor just over there was growing it in the ground and it did much better. So I added this in-ground portion.
And I just have planting holes throughout there in the weed fabric. The end of it is onions, and I usually keep that tilled up, or if I'm not using it for onions, I cover it with more weed fabric for other things that I could plant there.
Originally, that is the area where I was going to put my greenhouse. We moved it over here, and we're still working on it.
So I guess you'll have to stick around to see the rest of the greenhouse. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe. I upload most Sundays, and you can keep watching us grow our farm. Have a good one.